For 100 years, the Australian military strategy could be summarized in one sentence: protect the East and hope the West takes care of itself. During World War II, there was even a terrifying rumored contingency plan called the Brisbane Line, the idea that if Australia was invaded, we would abandon everything north and west of Brisbane and just defend the industrial core of Sydney and Melbourne. Western Australia was treated as a quarry, a place to dig holes, extract iron ore and ship it to Asia. It was economically vital, but strategically, it was an orphan. That era is over. On a quiet Tuesday in late 2024, the strategic map of the continent was set on fire. The government announced a massive multi-billion-dollar surge into Western Australia, headlined by the $12 billion expansion of the Henderson Defence Precinct. They aren't just building a dock. They are building a fortress. They are hiring an industrial army. The headlines say 20,000 jobs, but that number hides the real story. This is the Great Western Pivot. It is the admission that in the next war, Sydney isn't the front line. Perth is. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are dissecting the most significant geographic realignment in Australian military history. The narrative you've been fed is about jobs and growth. The politicians love to stand in high-vis vests and talk about the economy. But do not be fooled. This is not an economic stimulus package. This is a war footing. The Australian Army and Navy are fundamentally shifting their center of gravity. For decades, the fleet base east in Sydney was the jewel in the crown. But Sydney is bottled up. To get to the Indian Ocean, you have to sail around the continent. In a high-speed conflict, that transit time is a death sentence. Western Australia faces the Indian Ocean, the superhighway of global energy. It faces the Lombok Strait. It faces the Sunda Strait. It is the gateway to the world. So, the strategy has changed. We are turning Western Australia from a mining state into the industrial heart of AUKUS. We are turning the coastline south of Fremantle into the Norfolk, Virginia of the Southern Hemisphere. A massive, integrated complex capable of building ships, maintaining nuclear submarines and projecting power deep into the Indo-Pacific. This requires people. It requires a workforce the likes of which Australia hasn't mobilized since the Snowy Hydro scheme. But instead of building dams, these 20,000 people will be building the machines of war. If you want to understand why your tax dollars are flowing west, and why the next generation of Australian strategic power will be forged in Henderson and Rockingham, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We cut through the press releases to give you the cold, hard strategic reality. The $12 billion fortress. Let's look at the hardware. The centerpiece of this pivot is the Henderson Defence Precinct. For years, Henderson was a collection of commercial shipyards and maintenance sheds. It was functional, but it was fragmented. The new plan consolidates this entire strip of coastline into a unified, sovereign defense zone. The government is pouring in $12 billion initially, but that is just the down payment. Why? Because the Australian Army is going to sea. This is a critical change in doctrine. Historically, the Army walked or drove. If they needed to cross the water, they hitched a ride on a Navy ship. But in a literal environment, fighting in the archipelagos to our north, the Army needs its own organic mobility. They cannot wait for the Navy's massive amphibious assault ships, LHDs, every time they need to move a tank or a HIMARS rocket battery. Enter the literal maneuver vessel, heavy, LMVH. These aren't just landing craft like you saw in Saving Private Ryan. These are massive ocean-going vessels capable of carrying the Army's heaviest armor, the M1A2 Abrams tanks, the Boxer combat reconnaissance vehicles, and the long-range fires regiments. The Army is buying fleets of these, and they aren't buying them from Spain. They aren't buying them from South Korea. They are building them at Henderson. This is where the 20,000 number begins to materialize. To build these ships requires a massive surge in industrial capacity. We are talking about steel fabrication, advanced welding, systems integration, and heavy engineering. This is the reindustrialization of the West. For 30 years, Australia dismantled its manufacturing base. We became a service economy. We exported raw materials and imported finished goods. We thought globalization would last forever. We were wrong. The COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine taught military planners a brutal lesson. You cannot fight a war if your supply chain is in another hemisphere. If you can't weld your own steel, you aren't a serious military power. The Henderson Precinct is the answer to that vulnerability. It is designed to be a continuous naval shipbuilding hub. The idea is that the yards never go cold. As soon as one ship is finished, the next keel is laid. This creates a permanent, highly skilled, industrial army of tradespeople who know exactly how to build military-grade vessels. But it goes beyond the Army's landing craft. Henderson is also being prepped to build the Navy's future general-purpose frigates. The dockyard is being upgraded with massive ship lifts, secure fabrication halls, and classified systems integration labs. The scale of this is hard to visualize. Imagine a factory floor that stretches for kilometers along the coast. It is a city within a city, dedicated entirely to the production of naval combat power. This is the Henderson Beast. It is a signal to any potential adversary that Australia is no longer just a buyer of weapons, we are a maker of them. The Army's amphibious pivot. Why does the Army need this industrial backing in the West? Because the Army itself is transforming. Under the National Defence Strategy, the Army is pivoting from a force designed for counterinsurgency in the Middle East to a force designed for literal maneuver in the Pacific. This means the 10th Brigade based in Adelaide and the forces in the north need to be able to move. They need to be amphibious. The Western Australian coastline is the perfect training ground and launch pad for this capability. The geography of WA, with its massive tides, rugged coastline, and isolation, mimics the conditions of the region better than Sydney Harbour ever could. The Army is hiring people in WA not just to build the ships, but to support the logistics of this new amphibious force. You need mechanics who can fix a tank on a beach. You need signals officers who can coordinate fire support from a moving landing craft. You need supply chain experts who can keep a force fed and fueled 3,000 kilometers from home. The 20,000 figure includes the inevitable support ecosystem. When you build a major military industrial hub, you attract contractors, suppliers, technology firms, and service providers. This is the multiplier effect. The government realizes that you cannot defend the continent with a fly-in fly-out, FIFO, military. You need a resident workforce. You need people who live in Rockingham, Fremantle, and Cockburn, whose entire careers are tied to the defense industry. This creates a defense culture in Western Australia that rivals the mining culture. For a young person in Perth, the career path used to be clear. Study engineering and go work for Rio Tinto or BHP in the Pilbara. That was where the money was. The Henderson expansion challenges that dominance. Now the government is saying, come work for defense. We will pay you to build the ships that protect the trade routes. It is a battle for talent and the Army is hiring. The reality of SRF West. If Henderson is the shield, HMAS Stirling is the spear. And this spear is tipped with nuclear fire. Just a few kilometers down the coast from the Henderson shipyards sits Garden Island. This is the home of HMAS Stirling, the Navy's primary base in the West. For decades, it hosted our Collins-class diesel-electric submarines. But by 2027, the skyline of Garden Island will look very different. Under the AUKUS agreement, we are establishing Submarine Rotational Force West, SRF West. This is one of the most significant strategic moves in the history of the alliance. It means that up to 4 nuclear-powered attack submarines, 1 from the UK Royal Navy and up to 4 from the US Navy, will be rotating through HMAS Stirling on a permanent basis. These are Virginia-class and Astute-class boats. These are the apex predators of the ocean. Let's be clear about what this means. These aren't just visiting for a weekend of shore leave. They are operating from Perth. They are undergoing maintenance in Perth. They are rearming in Perth. This effectively makes Western Australia a forward operating base for the United States Navy and the Royal Navy. It integrates Perth into the global nuclear deterrence architecture. This drives the 20,000 hiring number even higher, but the requirements here are different. Building a landing craft for the Army is heavy industry. Maintaining a nuclear submarine is brain surgery. A nuclear submarine is the most complex machine humans have ever built. It is a nuclear reactor inside a steel tube, submerged in high-pressure salt water, filled with high explosives and sensitive electronics, designed to run silently for months at a time. You cannot fix these things with a wrench and a she'll be right attitude. The tolerances are measured in microns. The safety protocols are absolute. This requires a massive influx of specialized labor. We need nuclear physicists. We need radiological control technicians. We need electrical engineers who understand reactor plant control systems. We need welders who are certified to work on high-strength pressure hulls. The US and UK are sending hundreds of their own personnel to Perth to help set this up, but the goal is for Australians to do the work. This is the sovereign capability argument. We cannot rely on flying in Americans every time a valve needs replacing. So the recruitment drive is aggressive. The government is funding thousands of university places and STEM fields specifically to feed this nuclear neighborhood. They are trying to poach talent from the mining sector. They are trying to convince engineers that working on a Virginia-class submarine is more prestigious and more stable than working on an iron ore crusher. The nuclear mindset and the cultural shift. This shift to SRF West brings a cultural revolution to Western Australia. For a long time, the anti-nuclear sentiment in Australia was strong. But the strategic reality has overridden the political hesitation. The government has made the calculation that the security of the nation depends on these boats. The workforce required for SRF West creates a new class of worker in WA, the nuclear technician. These are high-paying, high-security clearance jobs. They require years of training. Once you are in this ecosystem, you are set for life. But it also changes the target profile of Perth. By hosting US nuclear assets, HMAS Stirling becomes a Tier 1 target in any global conflict. The people working there know this. The 20,000 aren't just employees, they are part of the deterrence. Their ability to turn a submarine around quickly, to fix it, arm it and get it back to sea, is a direct contribution to combat power. This is what we mean by the Great Western Pivot. It is psychological as well as industrial. The Navy is moving its command structure west. The operational tempo at HMAS Stirling is going to skyrocket. We are going to see more uniformed personnel, more foreign sailors and more security infrastructure. The infrastructure spend at Stirling is astronomical. Billions are being spent to lengthen the wharves, build secure maintenance facilities and upgrade the power grids. They are building a controlled industrial facility to handle radioactive components. This construction phase alone employs thousands. But the long-term sustainment is where the permanent jobs are. When the Australian-flagged SSN AUKUS submarines eventually arrive in the 2040s, the workforce at Stirling will already be mature. They will have spent 15 years working on American and British boats. They will be the elite of the Australian defence industry. Western Australia is becoming a garrison state, in the best sense of the military term. A self-sufficient, hardened and capable stronghold. The map, why Perth matters. To understand why the Army and Navy are hiring 20,000 people in the West, you have to look at a map. Not the map you see in school but a maritime map. Look at the Indian Ocean. It is the third largest body of water in the world, and it is the lifeline of the global economy. 80% of China's oil imports flow across the Indian Ocean from the Middle East, through the Malacca Strait to Shanghai. It is their jugular vein. If that flow of oil stops, the Chinese economy grinds to a halt, and their military machine runs out of fuel. China knows this. That is why they are pushing into the Indian Ocean. They are building a string of pearls, ports and bases in Djibouti, Pakistan, Sri Lanka and potentially Myanmar. They want to secure their energy lines. Perth sits on the flank of this energy superhighway. A submarine based in Sydney has to transit all the way around the bottom of Australia or through the congested Torres Strait to get to the Indian Ocean. It takes days, burning precious time and supplies. A submarine based in Perth is already there. It can slip out of Cockburn Sound, dive into deep water, and be in the shipping lanes in hours. It can patrol the Sunda Strait and the Lombok Strait, the back doors to the South China Sea. This geography is priceless. It makes HMAS Stirling the gatekeeper of the Indo-Pacific. The Army's role here is crucial too. The littoral maneuver capability being built at Henderson isn't just for the Pacific. It's for the protection of Australia's vast, empty, resource-rich northwest coast. The Pilbara region exports the iron ore and LNG that powers Asia. It is economically vital but militarily vulnerable. It is vast, empty and hard to defend. By building up the forces in the west, the Army can rapidly deploy to protect key infrastructure. Ports, airfields, gas plants, in the Northwest Shelf. The 20,000 are the guarantors of this security. They are the ones who ensure that the assets protecting the Pilbara are ready to fight. The tyranny of distance. We often talk about the tyranny of distance as a negative for Australia. It makes trade expensive. It makes travel long. But in the age of long-range missiles, distance is a friend. Sydney and the East Coast are closer to the Pacific flashpoints. But Perth is set back. It is deep in the strategic rear. This makes it a sanctuary. Chinese land-based ballistic missiles, like the DF-26, have a massive range, but hitting Perth from mainland China is at the very limit of their capability. It is much harder to strike HMAS Stirling than it is to strike US bases in Guam or Japan. This makes Western Australia the perfect staging ground. If a war breaks out in the first island chain, Taiwan/Philippines, US and allied forces might take heavy damage. They will need a place to retreat, repair, rearm, and regroup. That place is Western Australia. The Henderson Beast and the nuclear facilities at Stirling are designed to be that fallback point. The ability to repair a battle-damaged aircraft carrier or a nuclear submarine in the Southern Hemisphere is a strategic game-changer. Currently, if a U.S. carrier gets hit, it might have to limp all the way back to Pearl Harbor or the U.S. West Coast. If Perth can handle the repairs, the ship gets back in the fight weeks earlier. This transforms the 20,000 workers into a strategic asset. A welder in Henderson fixing a hull breach is just as important to the war effort as a pilot dropping a bomb. They are generating availability. In a long war of attrition, the side that can fix its ships faster wins. The Army's expansion in the West is also about protecting this sanctuary. You need air defense. You need ground security. You need special forces capable of counter-incursion operations. The hiring drive includes the expansion of the SASR, Special Air Service Regiment, capabilities and the support networks that keep them operational. The West is no longer just a mining pit. It is the fortress that protects the Alliance's ability to sustain a war. The new gold rush. Let's bring this back to the human level. What does this mean for the average Australian? For the last 20 years, the economic story of Western Australia was rocks and crops. You dug it up or you grew it. The economy rode the roller coaster of commodity prices. When iron ore was high, everyone bought jet skis. When it crashed, everyone went broke. This defense pivot offers something the West has never had: stability. Defense contracts are long-term. The AUKUS program is a multi-generational commitment. It spans 30 to 50 years. The shipbuilding at Henderson is continuous. This creates an economic floor for the state. If you are a young Aussie engineer, a project manager, a cybersecurity expert, or a master tradesperson, the advice used to be, move to Sydney or Melbourne for the corporate jobs. Now, the advice is move to Perth. The Army and the defense industry are creating a Silicon Valley of hardware in the West. The salaries are rising to match the mining sector. The housing market in Rockingham and Fremantle is heating up because thousands of families are moving in to service this boom. This is a brain gain for Western Australia. It is attracting the smartest minds in the country to solve the hardest problems in national security. The unsinkable aircraft carrier. Western Australia is evolving. It is shedding its reputation as the isolated frontier state. It is becoming the Norfolk, Virginia of the South, a massive, unsinkable aircraft carrier for the Western Alliance. The 20,000 people the Army and defense industry are hiring are the crew of this carrier. This pivot sends a message to the world. It says that Australia understands the stakes. We understand that the next century will be defined by the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific. And we are planting our flag in the sand and the steel of the West. The Henderson Defence Precinct and HMAS Stirling are not just infrastructure projects. They are monuments to a new Australian doctrine. A doctrine that says we will not be passive. We will build the ships. We will host the subs. We will secure the gate. The East Coast had its century. The next 100 years belong to the West. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Are you ready to move west for the defense boom? Or do you think putting all our eggs in the Perth basket is a strategic risk? Let us know in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay realistic, and we'll see you in the next one.